Perfect. All right, we're going to jump right into it. So what we're going to be talking about today is just some common things that students struggle with in university, and like basically how to get good grades. And we're going to be really changing like what the definition of like good might be, especially if you're coming from like a K to 12 different scenario there. So we're just going to be focusing on common issues that students face in the university and the solutions to them. And I've kind of split them up into 4 different categories. You're going to see that there's a little bit of overlap in some of them, but it's really just going to be, here's a common problem that we've seen that the University of Saskatchewan seen. I can't speak for the other institutions, but I know that, a first year in Saskatchewan is the exact base, they're going to face a lot of the same issues as a first year in like Alberta or somewhere in the States or whatnot. It's really just a systemic thing that students face. So jumping right into it, we're going to talk about the academic parts here. This is, of course, the big one. Like there's multiple ways to really get into about getting good grades. And of course, the academics is the big one here. So I wasn't able to put like any animation or something like that. So I apologize. It's all just right in your face like that. But how this kind of works here is you start at the top and work yourself down. And academically, what we've really noticed and what the research really indicates is that there's 3 big things that students struggle with as they start their first year of university. One's, of course, the academic rigor. A high school class is just not equivalent to a university class. There's much more difficulty. You are learning it at a rate of about 3 times faster. And there's a lot less hand holding. Now we're pretty good here at St. Peter's College about trying to, transition to that independence that a student requires. But it's still just that. It's a transition. You need to get to that end goal. Whether you start here or somewhere else, there is no magic pill. You need to put in the work to be able to get to a certain level. There's a university standard throughout the world, and students need to end up getting there. So with rigor, what we find that students really struggle with here is that there is a pretty big skill and study gap. There's so many students who, I got an 80 in high school, but I never really studied. You are the most prone for failing. The student with a 60 average who studied all the time will do better than you unless you change some of those habits. Because typically what we find is that the students who have no study skills, they procrastinate a lot. They're not great with deadlines. And really, they just don't know how to set that schedule and organize themselves. So really, like those students are most at risk. If you were the kid who got, good grades in university, who didn't have to study, you are the most at risk. You're the one who needs to put in the most work to develop those study skills. You could be the smartest person in the room. You could be the not smartest person in the room. The person with the best study skills is the one who's going to come out on top of that class. So with rigor, really some of the solutions that students can have is they can go and talk to their professors. They can go to office hours. There's always times that you can meet individually with a professor. There's tutoring. At St. Peter's College, we offer some free tutoring. At the University of Saskatchewan and University of Regina, they offer free tutoring as well. First year is one of those things where, again, institutions throughout the entire Western world have realized that there are common difficulties that students face. They offer some free study skill sessions, some free tutoring in like common classes like math and science and being able to write an essay. They offer supports in those for first year students. So make sure you're taking advantage of those. Whether you go to St. Peter's College or elsewhere, there will be opportunities to make sure that your study skills are brought up and that there's some tutoring availability there. Of course, there's also paid tutoring as well, but if you can get it free, why would you pay for it? There's something we call Academic Center of Excellence, but really it's just that. It's a study skill little seminar there. Time management is one of the biggest ones as well. We typically have, like when we meet with students, we typically recommend like a certain number of classes they want to take. Are you planning on working? How well have you studied in high school? So on and so forth. It is difficult for any student really to be able to maintain a good, healthy work life if they're working, good, healthy school life, good personal life, and have a good home balance. That's tough because for every class that a student takes, there will be between 3 to 6 hours of high quality study time in that class per week. And what I mean by high quality is they're actually sitting down and focusing on the study. It's not Netflix is on the background and they check their phone every 2 or 3 minutes. It's quality. And something else that a lot of students really struggle with when we say time management, we don't mean, make a schedule and study this much and study this much. We do mean that, but you also need to realize that you can't do stuff last second anymore. That's a common trap a lot of students fall into. Oh, even if it's a minor, small assignment, oh, I'll just do it the night before it's due. It's fine. You run into one struggle, you will not be able to ask for help unless your professor is just fantastic and is checking their email at 9 p.m. the night before. Because if you're on especially if you're on a big campus like, U of S or U of R, even a bigger one like UBC or U of T, you're in a class of hundreds of people. It will take that professor time to get to your email. They typically the rule of thumb is it can take up to 48 hours. So we recommend just build a good study plan, form some good study habits, and just treat school as a full-time job. Because if you were here last one, we did the cost analysis. I didn't actually say this in that presentation, but you're spending around $20 to $30, depending on what school you go to, per hour to be a university student. That's a lot of money. It's a significant investment. If you think about it like that, you're gonna treat it a little bit more seriously, I think. And then it's just the independence. In high school, you can kind of get babysat a little bit. There's a little bit more handhold in there. That's not so much in university. We're pretty lucky here to be able to know all of our students and be able to ask how they're doing and talk to our professors so that we know which students struggle and we can kind of build a plan from then on. And this isn't to take away anything from U of S or U of R or another institution. It's just because we are smaller, we can do that. That will not happen on any larger campus because, again, there are 26,000 students, for example, at U of S. There are students who fall through the cracks. There are systems put in place. They do a really good job with a lot of the students that go there, but just with the more students there are, the more likely a student is to fall through the cracks. So you just have to realize that that newfound independence can really be a struggle for some students. You need a big adjustment period sometimes. And so really we recommend just being proactive. We've noticed that avoidance is a really common strategy. And that's something that all of the institutions, when we talk to them, that's a really common thing that youth of today seem to struggle with is they face an issue and they will just avoid, they'll avoid, trying to avoid the consequences. And they know that, it's just going to add up and add up. I didn't do assignment 1, so now I'm not going to do assignment 2 and then assignment 3. It's just going to get worse and worse. And they're aware of that, but it's just that coping mechanism that seems to have developed over the last few years. So I just have some notes there. I'm sure you've read through it at this point, but a couple things I really want to highlight here is your skills, your reading comprehension, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, they will increase a lot, especially in the first year. They will increase over time. So typically students, they have the hardest time in the first 6 weeks. They get their first marks, like first midterm marks back sometime in mid-October. And it's just shock. Like, I'm a 90 student. Why am I getting a 60? That's fine. That's common. That's common. Because it takes you longer to do things. You're not as good as the skill. You'll get a lot better with that skill as you practice it daily for 4 years. You get way better with it and be able to do it quicker. And the other thing I want to really point out is the first year's the toughest. When we look at the data, when we look at the grades, your grades are the lowest in first year. They will get higher as you go on because, again, you've developed better study skills. You develop better literacy skills, and you just know, that, oh, I'm the type of person who stays up late, so I'm going to get it done 2 days before. Like I know that, I'm a last seconder, and you start to develop those interventions on yourself. And then another thing there is just because even if you are studying, there probably still are better ways to study. Again, we go back to that time management thing. Just because you're just putting the time in doesn't mean you're getting the most out of it. So there are better ways to study, especially for certain classes. And so that's where you really want to talk to your advisors or professors or other students to kind of get those strategies in place. Mental health is a big one. All the universities and post-secondary institutions in the province, ourselves included, are part of something called Healthy Campus Saskatchewan. So all across the sector, we're all getting together and trying to figure, and just figuring out, how is mental health, this year, what are the problems that we're seeing? What are the solutions that we think that we could work on as an entire collaborative network? And of course, with COVID, we don't see this as much as we have in-person classes this year, but mental health is very much down. There's a lot more mental health issues. There's a lot more anxiety issues among students. So there's quite a bit. And so what we really kind of see here is that there seems to be an identity crisis with students is, again, back to that October time, I'm a 90 student. Why am I getting a 60s? and they feel like they're not cut out, they're not a good enough university student. Something to just expect though is, if you get 60s and 70s in your first year, I mean, could it be better? Yes. Could it be worse though? Absolutely. Like, that's not awful grades. That's decent grades. That's kind of what in line to expect, honestly. Um, And then honestly, and you're going to see this in the next one, there's a big system shock. You're in a new environment, especially if you're going to a big city and you're on a big campus, you're in a class of 400 students. That's a big system shock, especially if you're from a small town. With us, a lot of our students are from smaller towns, so it's not as big of a system shock, but still we get Saskatoon students who come in here, and that's different too. They went from a bigger place to a smaller place. That has its own set of challenges. Never mind going from a smaller place to a bigger place. One thing I really want to point out here, because mental health is quite a big deal, and we understand, like, how that affects your studies. When it gets time to finals or midterms and you're stressed, you might be keeping up really good study habits until that stress just builds up and completely explodes. So there's something called Access and Equity Services to St. Peter's College and at the University of Saskatchewan. And that's something that you can actually get support for. So they handle accommodations and making sure that you as a student are taken care of. 50% of the students with the University of Saskatchewan are registered with them for mental health and anxiety reasons. So if you have diagnosed depression, if you have an anxiety disorder or another mental health concern, you can get accommodations put in place. And what that, it's not a get out of jail free card, but what it really is saying is that, hey, around finals time, this person gets really stressed and they could really benefit from having like an extra day or two for their assignments. That goes a long way. So you want to make sure you're taking advantage of that. Something to remember is, a lot of other people are experiencing the same thing. They're experiencing a lot of the same system shocks as you are. We see a lot of students feel like, oh, well, it's not happening with other people. Well, it is. And I'm not sure if that helps or not. But they're not alone in like whatever they're typically struggling with. There's thousands of people on the main campus. There's, we get like 100, 150 students here. There's other people who have those same feelings in the room. And typically, it's just a lot easier to make friends at the start of school. Everyone's looking for the friend. Everyone's going through those same feelings where they might know one or two people in the room if they're lucky. So they want to try and branch out and get to know more people. Going on the social stuff here. Some students really thrive in university. Sometimes they thrive too much. The social comes before the academics. And of course, they're striking that balance there. But some students, they struggle with just the social life in general. And, we're not an exception to that either. Of course, we get students here who struggle with the social life here as well. Every university does. And really, there's two big ones. Again, going on back to before, the system shock. The system shock is huge. And so the big universities and us, we really try and navigate students quite well, like, guide them so that they can deal with those changes, that they understand what's going on and how they might be feeling and what they can do to kind of help out. I'm sorry, I'm giving you very vague stuff here. And, I know some of it's cliche, but the goal is to get you out of here in about 20 minutes. And I could honestly talk about hours with this stuff. But, people aren't really sure sometimes people aren't sure how to make friends. And admittedly, it's easier in the first few weeks. It is easier to make friends in university in the first few weeks because everyone's going through those same feelings. They haven't established a social life yet, a social club. They're not even sure what to expect yet. And students who have fewer friends and a social life, whether they're outgoing or ingoing, they like to play board games or whatever it might be, people who don't have as active of a social life, who are feeling more disconnected from their peers, they are more likely to drop out. That is one of the biggest things that actually universities try and do for to keep students enrolled, is they try and find them friends. They try and find them things to do, things that they like doing at the university and in their just local area. So we really recommend just talk to people on the first day, attend an orientation, because we always make sure that everyone tries to meet everyone else during orientation. You can really start develop that social crew right away, and then join a club. Even here at the college, like we have lots of different things. Like there's lots of people like playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's lots of like people like doing fitness. There's student government clubs here. There's like the study area study club. So there's lots of things to do still. And then another one here is the program plan. We've seen a lot of students who, even if they're doing well academically and they're getting good grades in school, They haven't set themselves up for success though in terms of their degree. Because remember, a degree is a multi-year journey. And so they might be unsure about their class selections. So they're either unsure or they're uninterested in some classes. And sometimes it honestly is because they're just an overwhelming amount of options. I can't tell you how many times, as an advisor, we talk to other advisors about this, is that, hey, you have to take one of these classes, and there's 20 different options, and they just freeze. They freeze. They don't really know how to handle it. So think about really, as you go to talk to an advisor and start booking class schedules, think about the classes you enjoyed in high school. Maybe read the descriptions in advance, because you will be overwhelmed by choice. It's a lot easier to pick one of two cereals than going down the whole cereal aisle. We really recommend that students experiment with options. One of the really big benefits we found here at St. Peter's actually is that because we have such a diverse set of students here, and there's about 100, 150 of them, you're going to be taking classes with, if you're a business student, you're going to be taking classes with, an engineer, a kinesiology, a pre-nursing, pre-social work, a person who's biologist, an art student. Like, you'll be taking classes with a little bit of everything. And we've really found that really helps students in being sure about what they want to do. They're able to talk to other people and realize that I didn't know that was an option I could do, or, ooh, I don't like them. Like, I don't like how they're saying and representing this thing. So maybe I'm a little bit more sure, but this is the right choice for me. This is one of the biggest problems, and you could almost say that this is a mental health concern. Even, is a lot of people really focus on an end goal. It's good to have an end goal, but we've seen a lot of people who have an identity crisis around it, who, like, vet med is like the easiest one to pick on here. We have so many students who come in here, I'm going to be a veterinarian, I'm going to be a doctor, and they're 17 years old and in high school still. It's great that they have their end goal, but this is the goal. These are the three things they need to do before they get there. So have the goal, but your priority is it's stage one there. So that end goal might not seem reachable in time, even. Like, it will be reachable eventually, but they might have like a timeline already established. And so we've seen a lot of students who, it gets to October, oh, I need an 80 average and I only got a 65, and it's October in my first year, and they just become disillusioned and kind of give up a little bit. And you have to realize that your marks increase. October is going to be the worst possible time for you, and then it gets a lot better. And lots of people don't get in on like these types of things, these competitive programs, on their first try. So you have to realize that you have to have some realistic expectations. We've seen so many students who build their identity as I'm going to be and not realizing that they need to focus on those first initial stages there. So having a plan B is super important for both your program and, frankly, your self-esteem. And typically, if those two are good, your grades tend to improve quite a bit with that. And like I said, a lot of people just second guess their program choices. So talk to your advisor. One thing I will want to say is a lot of students, about 50% of students in university, change their plan. At one point, they will change their plan. Over a third of those are in the first year alone. So lots of students change what they want to do. And that's not a bad thing, which is why the university and most universities establish the first year to be quite transferable. There's a couple exceptions in there. Like, if you start with engineering and decide you're going to be like a biologist after, there's very little there that will transfer over. But if you're like, I'm going to be I'm going to do commerce, and now I want to go and become like a psychologist or something like that, there's a lot that transfers over there. So you could usually still graduate on time. If you do want to talk to an advisor, it can sometimes take up to 2 weeks if you're on one of the bigger campuses, especially if you're in those hot zones, like the starts and the ends of terms. It will take a while sometimes. And we're pretty lucky in that students can just knock on our door and we're good to go there. But having that plan B is critical. And we're just about at the 20-minute timeline here. So there are a couple people in here. So if you want, you could actually, you could type in the Q&A or the chat if you have any specific questions here. But really, we just wanted to kind of highlight, some of these things that students struggle with. And I know that it's not all academic based, like, it's how to get good grades in university. These are all connected in that shape, though. I have them broken down into 4 categories, and there's a lot more than what you see on the screen right now. But you need to have a balanced approach here in university to really make sure that you flourish. If you are, if you're really getting really good grades, but you're not having like an excellent social life, if you're having mental health concerns, that will affect you eventually. So you want to come in with a balanced approach, and that typically students who do that, they end up, enjoying university more. They end up enjoying their career more. And that makes their university career and then their job career quite a bit more, quite a bit better for them, really. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type into the chat here. But otherwise, that's kind of it. We don't have anything happening next week. If you did want to attend, though, it's the week after the February break. We have 3 events coming up. One of them is, you've been accepted, now what? So that's just kind of like a quick timeline. Like, this is what you really need to be focused on. And in March, you need to do this. In April, you need to do this. In May, you need to do this. So it's just a really quick guide, like a timeline on stuff. Because typically what we find is that a lot of students who are the first in their family to go to university, or even the first time on their siblings, maybe mom or dad went to university, they don't really know where to start because there's a lot that's changed. When do I apply for student loans? When do I get textbooks? When do I register for classes? When do I do this? When do I do that? That's just something we're doing. So that's on the 23rd. We'll be having a quick session about that, 20 minutes. All these are 20 minutes. The 24th, this is for students who are just undecided. Like we talked about, a lot of people are undecided even going into university. So we've typically found a good way to, hey, you should probably focus on this. So this one's going to be a little bit more interactive, where talking to students, you can almost think of it as like really quick advising, if that makes sense, or group advising. And then on the 25th, we're just going to be doing just something specifically on St. Peter's College. So who are we? What do we offer? What do students say about us? And I mean, admittedly a little biased here, but why is St. Peter's College the best place to start your USAS degree? But that's what I have for you folks. So thanks for coming out. Like I said, I'll be monitoring the chat here for the next couple of minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help out.